I was already exhausted when my daughter walked into the hospital room. Chemo makes time weird. It's not hours and minutes anymore, it's just waves. Nausea, sleep, pain, paperwork, beeping, then nausea again. Bowel cancer isn't pretty, and chemo at 60, well, I wouldn't recommend it as a hobby. But I still knew exactly what time it was, because my daughter always came at the same time, 5:40 p.m., just after work, just before rush hour, just long enough to say she'd tried. She came in with her big tote bag, her phone in one hand, iced coffee in the other, that tight jaw she'd developed since she started working at the firm. She kissed my forehead without really looking at me, like you do when you're checking something off a list. "Hey, Mom," she said, dropping into the chair. "You look okay." I knew I didn't. I'd seen myself in the bathroom mirror that morning. Gray skin, bruised eyes, hair falling out in strange little clumps. The kind of face that makes people turn away, then feel guilty for it. The nurse, Carla, was in the room, checking my meds and chart. She gave my daughter a polite nod. My girl, my only child, leaned back in the hospital chair and exhaled, like she'd just run a marathon instead of ridden the elevator. "You sound tired," I said. "I am tired," she shot back. And there was an edge there I'd heard before. "I'm exhausted. I come here every single day, Mom." I tried to smile. "You don't have to come every day, honey. I told you that. That's not the point." She rubbed her temples, then looked at me with this mix of frustration and something like accusation. "You're an anchor around my life. I'm not going to take care of you." The words just hung there. Carla's pen froze over the clipboard. My daughter kept going, like she'd been holding this in for weeks and finally tore the seal off. "You're dragging me to the bottom. I'm tired of coming to see you every day. All I do is talk to you. The doctors do everything else. It's like I'm wasting my time just sitting here." The chemo drip kept its slow, steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Honestly, that sound hurt less than what she'd just said. I don't know what my face looked like, but I knew it wasn't good because Carla suddenly became fascinated with my IV line. My daughter crossed her arms defensively. She started, then stopped. "Look, I'm not saying I don't care. I do, but I have a life too. I'm up at 6, I'm at the office by 8, I'm working until 7. Then I come here, sit in this chair, listen to you talk about side effects and doctors and pain, and then I go home and answer emails until midnight. I can't keep doing this. I'm drowning." I could have said a lot of things. I could have reminded her who worked 2 jobs when she was little, who stayed up all night when she had the flu, who drove a 20-year-old Corolla until the wheels nearly fell off so she could have a decent used Civic in college. But I just said, "You're not obligated to be here every day, sweetheart." "Yeah, but if I don't come, I'm a terrible daughter, right?" She snapped. "I know how this works. People love to guilt trip you. Oh, your mom has cancer and you're not visiting every day? I can hear the judgment already." "No one is judging you," I said, quietly. "I'm judging me," she said. "I'm tired, Mom. I can't carry everyone. I'm not built for that. I'm not going to let my life get ruined because everyone wants a piece of me." She stood up, zipped her bag with sharp, angry movements, and slung it over her shoulder. "I have to go. I've got a deliverable due tomorrow, and my manager already thinks I'm slacking." She looked at me, and for half a second, some softness flashed through her eyes. But then it was gone. I'll try to come by this weekend." Then she left. The door clicked shut behind her, and the room went quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your own heartbeat sound loud. Carla lingered by the door, pretending to rearrange supplies, but her hands had gone still. She clearly didn't know whether to leave or say something. After a few seconds, she walked back to my bed and gently took my hand. "I'm very sorry your daughter doesn't understand how complicated this is. She's too young for that. Sometimes children need to burn themselves before they can understand someone else's pain. She's 32. My voice sounded brittle, even to me.
Carla gave a sad little smile. That's still young in the life smacked me around department. She squeezed my hand and then, mercifully, left me alone. And that's when the pain hit. Not the chemo pain, not the gut-twisting cramps or the bone-deep exhaustion or the nausea that made me feel like my insides were trying to escape. No, this one was different. This one sat right on my chest and whispered, "This is your fault." Because it was. I was the one who raised her that way. I'm the one who spent her entire childhood saying things like, "Think about yourself first, kiddo. No one else is going to do it for you. The world will try to pull you down. You fight back. You don't let them make you small. Don't let people use you, and if you do let them, make sure they pay you very well." I didn't have money. I didn't have a partner. I definitely didn't have a support system. What I had was a backbone, and I was determined to give my daughter the same, even if it came with a steel plate. When she was 3, my husband, well, ex-husband, walked out on us, said he needed to find himself, as if he'd misplaced himself behind the bar at Applebee's where he met the woman he eventually left me for. He divorced me, paid the bare minimum in child support, then disappeared into another state and another family. So it was me and my little girl in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Richmond, Virginia, me working the front desk at a clinic by day and cleaning offices at night, her growing up watching me make every dollar scream before I spent it. I wanted to give her the one thing I knew no one could take from her. A will so strong no hardship could break it. But I forgot to mention the side effects. I forgot to tell her, strength without compassion turns into cruelty. Boundaries without love become walls. Independence without connection is just isolation with better branding. Now I was lying in a hospital bed, tethered to machines, and my strong, independent daughter looked at me and saw a burden, dead weight, an anchor. And I was the one who'd handed her the chain. I lay there, feeling the chemo drip into my veins, and tried not to cry because crying made the nausea worse. All I could think was, I hope her character at least gives her a good life, even if I'm not in it. Then the vomiting started again, then again, and again. By the time it calmed down, I was wiped. Sleep isn't the right word for what happens with chemo. It's more like passing out in installments. One minute you're there, the next you're waking up with a dry mouth and a different nurse on shift. It was dark when my phone rang. I fumbled for it on the bedside table, knocking over the cup with the melted ice chips. I squinted at the screen. Unknown number. For a second, I thought it might be some appointment reminder, or maybe my ex randomly, or my daughter calling from another phone. "Hello?" I croaked. Silence. "Hello, who is this?" I tried again. A man's voice finally came through. Polite, crisp, a little nervous. "Is this Mrs. Carter?" he asked. "Yes. My name is Daniel Morris. I'm your daughter's, boss. Well, technically, I'm a senior partner at her firm." My stomach clenched. I knew that tone. I'd heard it at parent-teacher conferences when the teacher started with, "Your daughter is very bright, but..." "What's wrong?" I asked immediately. He cleared his throat. "I'm calling because your daughter has been working a lot of overtime. She applied to head a new department, and she's been pushing herself very hard." I could almost see him trying to find the professional words for, she went completely off the rails. "What happened?" I pressed. "She had a bit of a breakdown," he said. There was a disagreement with her manager. It escalated. She threw some key documents into the toilet. Then she set off the fire sprinkler system. All the computers were severely damaged when the sprinklers went off. And in the parking garage, she, pushed one of the company vehicles off the edge of the loading ramp into the drainage canal. I closed my eyes. Oh, baby, what did you do? She's not physically injured, he rushed to add, but her mental state seems fragile. The police were called, as you'd expect. When they asked if there was anyone who could come pick her up, she told them she was completely alone in the world, that there was no one to come for her. That one landed like a punch. No one. No one at all. But I remembered, he continued, that she once asked to leave work early to visit her mother who was in the hospital. I found your number in her HR file. The detective said you should call him as soon as possible. He gave me the number and the name of the detective.
I wrote everything down on the notepad the hospital leaves by the bed, my hand shaking. "Thank you for letting me know," I said. "Mrs. Carter," he said quietly, "for what it's worth, your daughter is a very talented woman. She just seems like someone who never learned how to ask for help." No, she learned. I just taught her that asking was dangerous. After we hung up, I called the detective. He picked up on the second ring. "Detective Alvarez?" he said. "Detective, this is Linda Carter. You have my daughter, Emily Carter, in custody." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Thank you for calling. I want to explain the situation to you." I braced myself. "Your daughter has caused major financial damage," he said. "The law firm estimates the loss in equipment, property, and disruption of business is substantial. However, they're reluctant to pursue the harshest possible charges. She's apparently a high performer, and they see this as an acute stress situation rather than malicious intent. They've made it clear they don't want to ruin her life, to quote them." "That sounds like them," I said, thinking of how my daughter always talked about the firm like it was the Vatican. "That said," he went on, "the state doesn't ignore crimes just because the victim is generous. She did destroy property, disrupt business, and endanger others, even if no one was hurt. The prosecutor is prepared to negotiate. But there's a catch." "Of course there is. She can be released from custody into the care of a responsible close relative," he said. "Someone who can guarantee she'll comply with treatment, show up to court dates, avoid further incidents. Given that she seems quite unwell, they're willing to consider a mental health diversion program instead of prison time, but only if someone steps up to supervise and support her." "And if no one does?" I asked. He hesitated. "If there's no suitable guardian," he said, "then the prosecutor will proceed with formal charges. Given the damage amount, she's looking at a felony. The recommendation on the table right now is 2 years in state prison, with eligibility for counseling programs and early release, depending on behavior." I swallowed. My mouth had gone dry again. "So, if I take her," I clarified slowly, "they'll try to get her into treatment instead?" "Yes, ma'am," he said, "but you should understand, that means you'll be legally responsible for her compliance. You'll need to be able to supervise her, take her to appointments, monitor her medication. The judge will want to see that you're capable of providing stability." I looked at the IV in my arm, the chemo bag, the hospital bracelet on my wrist. I thought about the nights I woke up soaked in sweat, shaking, wondering if I'd live long enough to see her turn 40. "Detective," I said, "I'm in the oncology ward at St. Francis. I'm very sick. I'm in chemotherapy for bowel cancer. I don't know if I'll even be alive in 6 months, much less capable of supervising anyone." "I understand, ma'am, but the court doesn't have many options. They can't just send her home without someone in charge, not after an incident like this." I stared at the ceiling, the white tiles,
the yellowed spots near the vent, the flickering light in the corner. The machine kept beeping steadily. This is the part where a good mother says, "Do whatever you have to, but please don't send my baby to prison." I thought about saying it. I really did. But then, in the middle of that hospital room, half drugged and exhausted, a thought came to me so clearly, it might as well have been spoken aloud. If I taught my daughter to be strong, then maybe now I could teach her compassion. Teach her what it feels like when there is no one. Teach her that other people's pain is not optional. It was a terrible thought. It was also a true one. I'd spent her whole life telling her to protect herself at all costs, to never let anyone drag her down, to consider every ask, every favor, every obligation in cold, transactional terms. And now here we were. I was sick. She saw me as dead weight. She told the police there was no one who could come for her. She had become exactly what I trained her to be. And I hated it. "Detective," I heard myself say, "if there is no one to take custody, what happens?" "She'll be processed, arraigned, and, if she accepts the plea, transferred to a state facility. The prosecutor is recommending 2 years.
She'd probably serve less provided she participates in counseling and maintains good behavior, but that's ultimately up to the judge and the Department of Corrections. So that was the path. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if there is any way you could—" "I can't take her," I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. "I am not capable of caring for her in my condition. I would be lying to the court if I said I was." He was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure?" he asked finally. "No, not even a little." "Yes," I said, "but I do have one request." "Yes, ma'am." If she asks why no one took her," I said slowly, "I don't want you to tell her I refused. I want you to tell her the truth, that her mother was dying and that there was no one who could take her. It wasn't a lie, not completely. I was dying, statistically. My odds weren't great. And even if I lived, I'd be crawling my way back from chemo hell, not running around managing a grown woman with a penchant for office arson light." "I understand," he said. "You're her only close relative on record. Her father is absent?" "That's one way to put it," I muttered. "I'll inform the prosecutor," he said. "They'll move forward. For what it's worth, Mrs. Carter, sometimes a hard consequence is the only thing that breaks a pattern." "I'm counting on it," I said quietly. After I hung up, I just lay there. I'd essentially signed the paperwork, metaphorically, to send my daughter to prison. What kind of mother does that? The kind who taught her daughter that everyone else's needs were negotiable. The kind who knew that if this didn't break through, nothing would. "Let her sit," I whispered to the blank ceiling. "Let the noise stop. Let her finally feel what it's like when there really is no one." And then, because I am selfish and stubborn and not done with this world yet, I made myself another promise. As soon as I beat this cancer, I would come back for her. I would walk into that prison, alive, and I would become the person who came to get her. But not yet. First, I had to survive. The next months blurred into one long tunnel. Chemo, nausea, scans, blood work, tears, paperwork, more chemo. I didn't see my daughter. I couldn't. Partly because I physically couldn't drag myself to a prison visitation room, even if I'd told the state I would, but partly because this was the only way the lesson could stick. No half measures. No, "I'll rescue you halfway through if you're really sorry." Carla became something like family. She'd work my room into her rounds even when I wasn't technically on her shift. She'd sit at the edge of my bed, scroll through her phone, and tell me stories about her kids, her husband, the ridiculous patient who tried to smuggle in hot wings. Sometimes I'd tell her about Emily, the toddler who used to sleep on my chest, the teenager who slammed doors and got straight A's, the 20-something who moved to D.C. and became that person. Tailored clothes, power walk, Bluetooth in her ear 24/7. "You love her," Carla would say softly. Of course I do, I'd answer, annoyed that she even had to say it. Then why? She'd trail off. Because love isn't always saying yes, I'd snap. Sometimes love is saying, this is where your choices led you, kiddo. Sit with it. We didn't talk about it much after that, but I saw the look in her eyes sometimes, that, I hope this works because if it doesn't, you'll never forgive yourself. Months passed. Hair gone, eyebrows thinned, skin turned a color I'd never seen on a human before. They poisoned me just enough to kill what wanted to kill me, then drag me back from the edge. I got used to the oncology floor sounds, the rolling carts, the coughing, the muted TV shows. I watched people come in looking scared and leave looking tired but hopeful. I watched others come in and never leave. There were nights I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I made a terrible choice and my daughter will come out on the other side of this, believing her mother died and left her alone on purpose. Then finally, a gray March afternoon, my oncologist walked in with a folder and a smile that didn't look forced. "Linda," he said, "we got your latest scans back." I sat up a little straighter. "And?" He showed me the images, the numbers, the markers I'd come to dread. "The chemo did the job," he said. "The tumor has shrunk significantly. Your blood work is stable. We're not out of the woods, but we're in a clearing. I'm calling this remission." Remission. Not a guarantee, but a reprieve.
I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a year. "Does that mean I'm done?" I asked. "Not done," he said, "but we can reduce the intensity. We'll move to maintenance, regular checks, some oral meds, lifestyle adjustments. You'll need to rebuild your strength, but you're not dying today." I laughed, and it came out half-sob. After he left, Carla hugged me so carefully you would have thought I was made of glass. "So," she said, "what's the first thing you're going to do with your almost new life?" I didn't even hesitate. "I'm going to get my daughter," I said. It took time. First, I had to walk from my bed to the bathroom without feeling like I'd run a marathon. Then from my doorway to the nurse's station. Then down the hall and back. Chemo turns your muscles into wet paper towels, and I had to wring them out and reshape them. Social workers helped me apply for disability and temporary home care. I learned how to cook for a stomach that now rejected half the foods I used to love. I sat in a support group with other middle-aged and older people who'd been cracked open by illness and were trying to put their lives back together. 4 months. That's how long it took from the day the doctor said remission to the day I walked, with my own 2 wobbly legs, through the metal detectors of the Virginia Women's Correctional Facility. Emily had been sentenced to 2 years. With credit for time served and good behavior, eventually, she'd be walking out just around the time those 4 months were up. The first months, I heard later, were a disaster. She came in fighting, literally. She mouthed off to the guards, she argued with the counselor, she shoved another inmate who got in her space. Solitary confinement became a regular destination. A small, cold box with nothing to distract her from the one thing she'd spent her whole life avoiding, her own thoughts. No email, no Slack, no deliverables, no performance reviews, no manager to impress, just 4 gray walls and a metal toilet, and the realization that she had, in fact, burned her own life down. I didn't visit. Not once. I did, however, send 1 letter. Short, clear, in my shaky handwriting. "Emily, I am alive. I am in treatment for cancer. I could not take you because I could barely take care of myself. I am not abandoning you. You are facing the consequences of your own choices. I love you. Mom." I never said, "I sent you there." I never said, "I chose this for you." I didn't need to. Life had already delivered the message, and I was just not intercepting it. She didn't write back. Not at first. Then, a few months in, I got my first letter. It was 3 sentences, angry, jagged handwriting. "I thought you were dead. I hate you. I miss you." I read it twice, then folded it up and put it in the nightstand drawer.
Carla, who'd become something like my unofficial consultant on all things emotional fallout, asked, "Are you going to respond?" "Not yet," I said. "Let her simmer." That sounds cruel. Maybe it was. But my daughter had spent 32 years believing that feelings were inconveniences to be bulldozed. Sitting with them was the only way she'd ever learn they wouldn't kill her. Time did its work on both of us. She went through counseling sessions inside, mandatory ones. At first, she treated them like a performance review, from what her therapist later told me. Polished answers, clever phrases, blaming stress, her boss, the toxic work culture, the pressure to be perfect. Then one day, the counselor asked her, "When's the first time you remember feeling like your feelings didn't matter?" She apparently sat there opening and closing her mouth like a fish before finally blurting out, "When my mom would say, 'Don't be soft. Soft people get crushed.'" The counselor nodded and said, "And how do you feel right now, sitting in a prison jumpsuit?" That's when the dam started to crack. For me, the cracking came at the grocery store the first time I went by myself after treatment. I was standing in the produce aisle staring at a pile of oranges because my nutritionist said, "Vitamin C is your friend." And I realized I had no idea what my daughter looked like now. Had she lost weight? Gained some? Cut her hair? Did the prison gray wash out the color of her eyes? She was out there somewhere, in a dorm full of women who'd made their own terrible choices, and we were both learning, separately, that strength without connection is just a fancy word for loneliness. Finally, release day came.
The prison gate area was ugly as sin. Concrete, chain link, faded yellow paint lines on the asphalt. The sky was a flat, unforgiving blue, and the sun reflected off the cars in blinding streaks. I wore the nicest thing I owned that still fit me, a soft blue blouse, black pants, and a scarf Carla had knitted for me when my hair fell out. My hair was growing back in strange little gray tufts, like a baby chick. A guard walked out with a clipboard. "Carter?" he called, glancing around. "That's me," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He checked something off and nodded toward the door. "She'll be out in a minute," he said. Then, almost kindly, "You can wait right there." The metal door buzzed and swung open. And there she was, my girl. Emily walked out in prison-issue clothes that hung a little loose on her frame. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, pulled back in a small bun. There were lines on her face I'd never seen before, a set to her shoulders that said the world had finally gotten some licks in. She looked around, dazed, like someone stepping out of a movie theater into daylight. Her eyes landed on me. She froze. It was like watching a glitch in real time. Her brain clearly tried to file me under hallucination, then ghost, then some woman who looks like my mother. "Hi, baby," I said. "Miss me?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes filled with tears so fast they might as well have been waiting at the edge. "You're alive," she whispered. "Last time I checked," I said. My throat was tight, but I kept my voice light because if I started sobbing, I wasn't sure I'd stop. She took a step toward me, then another, then stopped a few feet away like there was an invisible line she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross. "You," her voice shook, "you told them you couldn't take me." I took a breath. "I told them I was dying," I said, "because at the time that's what it looked like. And because it was true that I couldn't take care of you. I could barely stand up. I thought," she swallowed hard, "they told me no one could come, that my mother was dying. I thought you were dead. I thought you died and didn't want to see me before you." Her voice cracked. I took the steps she couldn't. When I reached her, I put a hand on her cheek. She flinched, then leaned into it like she'd been starving for touch. "I didn't leave you," I said softly. "I just didn't rescue you." A single tear slid down her face. "I was so angry at you," she whispered. "I know. I hated you," she added like a confession.
I know, I repeated. I talked about you all the time in counseling, she said with a short, humorless laugh. They probably know you better than you know yourself now. Then they must be very bored, I said dryly. She choked out a laugh that turned into a sob. I got into fights, she admitted. At the beginning, I couldn't stand people touching my stuff, looking at me, breathing too loud. They threw me into solitary so many times I thought they were going to just leave me there forever. Yeah, I heard about that, I said. You've never been good at quiet, kiddo. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw my little girl again. The one who used to curl up in my lap when thunder scared her, even when she was already too big for it. In that box, I kept thinking about that day at the hospital. My chest tightened. The day you told me I was an anchor, she whispered. I remember. I kept thinking, why did I say that? What kind of monster says that to their mom while she's hooked up to chemo? You were drowning, I said. You just forgot I taught you how to swim in the first place. I was so sure I was alone. My whole life, I've been so sure that it was me versus the world, me or them. If I didn't protect myself, no one would. If I didn't say no, I'd get used, crushed, drained. I didn't interrupt. For once in my life, I let her talk until she was done. And then I got here, and I realized that there are people who really are alone. People nobody calls, nobody writes. People who don't have anyone waiting at that gate. People whose moms are actually dead, not just sick and stubborn. Hey, I said, gently. Watch who you're calling stubborn. She managed a real laugh this time. I watched women get release dates and then cry because there was no one to pick them up. They'd walk out that door with a plastic bag of their stuff and no rides, no money, nowhere to go. And I kept thinking about that phone call at the police station when they asked if there was anyone who could come for me. And I told them, no, I have no one.
You believed it, I said. I did, she said. I treated your love like a subscription service I could cancel any time I felt inconvenienced. And then one day, it wasn't there to fall back on. And I realized I'd built my whole identity on being untouched. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry for what I said at the hospital. I'm sorry for making you feel like you were dragging me down. You spent my entire childhood carrying me, and I couldn't even sit in a chair next to you without acting like I was having my life stolen. There it was, the thing I'd been waiting to hear and also terrified to hear. I'm sorry too, I said quietly. Her head snapped up. For what? For teaching you that needing people was dangerous, I said. For raising you to be a fortress instead of a person. For making strength the only language you knew. You were doing the best you could, she said immediately. I smiled sadly. Yeah, well, the best I could still landed you in a jumpsuit. We stood there in that weird little space between the prison and the parking lot, between her old life and whatever came next. Do you have room for me? She asked finally. In your life, I mean. I don't have a job. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got this record now. Emily, I interrupted. I did not beat cancer just to let you couch surf your way through life like a raccoon with a LinkedIn account. Of course I have room. I just don't have space for the version of you that walked into my hospital room that day. She nodded slowly. I don't have space for her either. We walked to my car together. I'd upgraded from the ancient Corolla to a slightly less ancient used Camry, courtesy of a very kind social worker who helped me navigate a charity program. Emily looked at it and snorted. Still allergic to new cars, I see, she said. I prefer ones that don't smell like plastic and regret, I replied. On the drive home, she stared out the window like the world was too bright, too loud, too much. Did you ever come see me? She asked suddenly. No, I said. She turned to me, surprised. At all? Nope, I said. I wrote you one letter. I figured prison was already full of people trying to rewrite their own stories. You didn't need me swooping in to give you a script. That hurt, she admitted. At first, I kept waiting for you to show up to, I don't know, cry and apologize and beg them to let me out. I know, I said, and that's exactly why I didn't. Because you're evil, she said. Because, I countered, if I had swooped in, you would have learned nothing except that you can set the world on fire and Mom will show up with a fire extinguisher. I am 60 years old. I do not have the upper body strength for that anymore. She laughed. Then she got quiet again. In counseling, I kept saying, my mom abandoned me. And my therapist kept asking, is that true? Or did she step back and let your choices play out? I hated that question. It's a good question, I said. Yeah, she sighed. It is. We pulled into my apartment complex. It's not fancy. 2-story brick buildings, patchy grass, a pool that's more decorative than functional. But it's mine. The manager knows me by name. The lady in 2B brings me banana bread every Christmas. I parked and turned to her. Here's the deal. You can stay with me while you get back on your feet. You'll sleep on the pull-out couch. You'll help with groceries and chores as soon as you get any kind of income. I will not be your maid, your secretary, or your emotional punching bag. She nodded, serious. Okay. I will go to therapy, I added. Real therapy, out here. If you so much as try to turn it into a performance review, I will know, and I will throw a sandal at you. She choked on a laugh. Okay? And, I said, softening just a little, we will try again at being mother and daughter, but this time with different rules. What kind of rules? She asked quietly. Rule 1, I said. You are allowed to need people. She looked like she wanted to argue, then deflated a little. Okay. Rule 2, I continued. Other people are not anchors. They're not weights you're forced to drag. They're like ropes. You hold on to each other when the water gets rough. Sometimes they pull you. Sometimes you pull them. That's life. She blinked fast. And rule 3, I said, you do not, under any circumstances, throw important documents into toilets. We are a pro-file cabinet household now. She laughed, tears sliding down her cheeks. Deal, she whispered. We went inside.
The next weeks were awkward. We were both different people than we'd been the last time we lived under the same roof. I was softer in some places, harder in others. She jumped at sudden noises, flinched when someone knocked too loudly, and slept with the hallway light on for the first few nights. Sometimes we'd snap at each other over stupid things, dishes, noise, the way she hogged the bathroom mirror, old patterns trying to claw their way back. But then one of us would stop, take a breath, and say some version of, this isn't how we do things anymore. She got a job at a small print shop. Nothing glamorous, minimum wage, basic benefits. The owner knew about her record and hired her anyway after she came in with an honest explanation and references from her prison counselor. It's weird, she said one night over spaghetti. Having a job where no one expects me to be a superhero. I just print things. People thank me. No one yells. No one's car gets pushed off a loading ramp. We love low bars in this house, I said. Low bars are where the real healing happens. She started going to therapy twice a week. Sometimes she'd come home drained, eyes red, and collapse on the couch. Sometimes she'd come home quietly, thoughtful. One evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table paying bills when she slid a folder toward me. What's this? I asked. My records, she said. From the firm, from the court, from therapy, everything. I want you to see what happened. Not the version I've been telling, but the actual paper trail. I opened it. There it was. The incident report from the office, the damage estimates, the witness statements, the court transcripts, notes from her counselor about rigid self-reliance and difficulty tolerating vulnerability. You don't have to read it all at once, or at all. I'm done hiding it. I don't want there to be any more secrets between us. I looked up at her. This is a lot, I said. I know, she said. I spent my whole life building a fortress of I'm fine, and it ended with me crying in a holding cell. I'm tired.
I don't want to be alone in my head anymore. I closed the folder and put my hand over it. I'll read it, I said. Not because I want to relive your worst day, but because I want to understand how you got there. She nodded, relief written all over her face. I didn't read it that night, or the next, but I did, slowly, over the next few weeks. A few pages at a time, with tea and sometimes a blanket ready for when the emotions got to be too much. Some parts hurt. Some parts made me proud. Some parts made me want to go back in time and smack both of us upside the head. One night, after I'd read a particularly brutal section about her meltdown at the office, I put the folder down and called her into the kitchen. "You know what strikes me the most?" I asked. "Please don't say the part where you went completely crazy," she said with a wince. "No," I said. "The part where right before you threw those documents in the toilet, your manager told you you're too emotional for leadership." She flinched. "Yeah, that one stuck. I told you your whole life that emotions made you weak. Then a man tried to weaponize that exact belief against you. I built the ammo. He pulled the trigger. You threw the gun in the toilet." She snorted. "That's one way to see it. I'm not saying you shouldn't have consequences. You did dangerous, destructive things. You scared people. You cost a lot of money. Prison was harsh, but maybe it was the only thing loud enough to break through the noise in your head." She leaned against the counter, hugging herself. "In solitary," she said, quietly, "I kept thinking about that day at the station when they asked if there was anyone to come get me. I heard myself say, 'No, there's no one.' And it was like I was hearing all the times you'd been there for me and just erased them. You were scared. I was spoiled," she corrected. "Not with money, with the assumption that you'd always bend yourself into a pretzel to make sure I never felt alone. When that safety net disappeared, I realized I'd never actually learned how to stand on my own without kicking everyone away." Silence settled between us. Comfortable. For once. "So," she said eventually, "do you feel vindicated?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because you went to prison?" "Because your lesson worked," she said. I thought about it. "No," I said. "I don't feel vindicated. I feel relieved. And a little heartbroken. And very, very tired." "Same," she said. I smiled. "But I do feel something else." "What?" she asked. "Hope," I said simply. Her eyes filled again. I swear, prison had turned my steel-hearted daughter into someone who cried at the drop of a hat. And honestly, I considered that a win. We're not a Hallmark movie, my daughter and I. There are still days she snaps and I snap back. There are still moments she disappears into her phone, and I want to grab it and toss it out the window. There are nights when I wake up in a cold sweat, sure the cancer is back, and I hear her in the next room, pacing, because she's sure everyone she loves will vanish if she blinks. But then she'll make me tea without being asked, or I'll drag myself to one of her therapy sessions, and the counselor will say, "Emily, can you tell your mother what you told me about needing her?" And my daughter will look me dead in the eye and say, "I thought you were an anchor dragging me down. Turns out, you were the rope keeping me from being swept away." I'm still not sure if what I did qualifies as revenge, tough love, or just a desperate gamble by a tired, sick woman who'd run out of softer options. All I know is this. My daughter walked into my hospital room once and told me she wasn't going to take care of me. Now, when I go in for my follow-up scans, she's there. Not because she's guilt-tripped, not because she's scared of what people will think, but because she wants to be. She brings her laptop sometimes, sure, old habits die hard. But she closes it when the doctor walks in. She holds my hand when we wait for results. She asks questions. She listens. And when I tell her, You don't have to come every time. She smiles and says, I know. I'm coming because I want to. You're not an anchor, Mom. You're my family. I can't change the fact that I once taught her to see the world as a battlefield, but I can spend the time I have left teaching her something new. That strength isn't just how hard you can fight, it's how gently you can hold on.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye.